As you've heard, the book is called Sent. It's with Hilary Alan, and she is our guest today. I think the subtitle is always interesting in books like this, How One Ordinary Family Traded the American Dream for God's Greater Purpose. Why don't you tell us what led you to Southeast Asia, because you had been living a normal, if one can put it that way, a normal life in the United States, right?
That's right, Steve. And actually, God's call for us to go to Southeast Asia came about in a very unexpected way. We weren't aiming in that direction. It's probably the last thing we would have expected. But we were on our way to a vacation, actually, when we first saw the pictures of the 2004 tsunami in Asia. And to be completely honest and transparent with you, our first reaction was, wow, that looks so bad. And then they said, we were stopping in a car dealership having a car repair done on our way down to Florida. And they said, your car's ready. And we thought, great, let's go. We're on vacation. And we never gave it another thought. And then a few weeks after that, we were at our home church, and our pastor, who had previously served in the part of the world, one of the parts of the world where the tsunami was, made a call for volunteers. And he said, I need people with water purification, construction, and medical experience to go. And I need as many of you to go for as long as possible. And my husband was an IT director, and he stood up and said, I don't meet any of those qualifications, but I feel like I'm supposed to go.
What had your husband been doing?
He was an IT director at a software company.
Okay.
And so they said, what's your background? And kind of, okay, thanks for offering.
Yeah.
And then a couple of weeks after that, we got a call saying that he was exactly the person that they needed because so much relief money had been pouring into the area, and they needed someone with business expertise to come and write project proposals and manage a lot of the relief money that was coming in. And so he didn't meet any of the requirements initially, but he turned out to be exactly the person they were looking for. And he went over for a 6-week, short-term, if you will, volunteer trip without us, just by himself. And then shortly after he returned from that, he knew God was calling our whole family to go. So about a year after he came back, the 4 of us went.
Wow. So, and this started because your church got involved in this relief effort. Is that right?
Right. Our pastor had a personal interest in the particular area that we worked in because he had previously worked in that area. So he had connections, and he knew of the need. I mean, the whole world knew of the need, but he was determined to put people from our church in that area and get started helping immediately.
Okay, so then your family, your whole family, which was you and your husband and children?
we have 2 children who were 11 and 14 when we decided to go over.
Okay, so you head over there. What were you expecting to do there?
We were community developers, so the kind of relief phase of the tsunami recovery was being phased out, and now the development part was being phased in. So returning livelihood to people who had lost, their means of income, and just, providing counseling and training for teachers, because thousands of teachers were lost in the tsunami. So bringing expertise from the states and training teachers in the area. We also did professional development seminars. Our team did redevelop communities on the ground as well, particular villages, by rebuilding homes, building community centers, but going into the villages and talking to the residents and hearing from them, what their needs were, as opposed to, this is what we think they need.
I see. And so how long were you there initially?
We were there for 3 years.
Oh, 3 years. Wow. You knew it was going to be that long?
No. Initially, we signed a contract for 2 years, but we weren't ready to go home after 2 years. We were, by then we thought, we feel like we're just getting started. We were enjoying it too much, and we knew there was so much more to do. So it was easy to stay another year.
Wow. And so did your position there, what you were doing, shift? It must have, from tsunami relief to something else, right?
It did. Initially, like I said, we were involved in rebuilding communities. And then once the communities that we had been dedicated to seeing rebuilt, and I don't mean just physically, but just, really getting to know the people in those communities and what their needs were and how they could be met. And then kind of spreading our net a little wider to conduct business seminars and trainings for teachers were opened up to the larger population in the city. We also did some counseling. There was a great need for that, you can imagine, after the trauma of the tsunami.
Yeah. Now, your view of how God works, it sounds like that's kind of changed, because you felt a little distant when you were here in the States, and that changed over there. Am I right in that?
It wasn't my view of how God works as opposed to my relationship with Him.
Well, elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, before we went over there, we considered ourselves serious, Christians, and we attended church, and we were involved in the stuff of church. But through this process of undoing our American lives and going over to Southeast Asia and living and working amongst an unreached people group, it really made us realize that we had been in a relationship with Christ on our terms prior to going overseas. And in Him calling us to Southeast Asia, we really had to finally just, stop living in our own strength, because we were so ill-equipped for this. We had no previous training or any kind of special experience that would have qualified us to do this. So it was completely of the Lord and in His strength. And, Proverbs 3:5-6 became such a precious verse for our family because we realized how quick we were to not trust in the Lord with all our heart, but really trust in ourselves with all our heart, and then, trust in Him somewhat. Do not lean on your own understanding. Well, most of the time we really were leaning on our own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. We really learned how to live Proverbs 3:5-6 through this whole experience.
Yeah, well, that's it's always good to have a reference point that otherwise might not have been a reference point unless you were cast into this kind of a situation. What your role now then in Southeast Asia is to do what?
We are not currently working in Southeast Asia. We are currently based in the States.
Okay, so you are back here. Are you going to be heading back there, do you think?
Lord willing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I suppose, the technical parts of it, you have to raise funds, I suppose, to do all this kind of thing initially and to continue, I suppose. Is that right?
We did not have to raise support to go over.
Oh, that's a relief for a lot of people who otherwise have to.
Yes, it is. I have great admiration and respect for people who raise their own support. I know that's not easy.
Yeah. So you're back here and working to in what capacity now?
My husband is the missions pastor at the Summit Church in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and so he trains and equips and facilitates people going to the nations, and I help him in that as his wife, and so I help with counseling and kind of being a coach to people who are in the process to go overseas.
Oh, okay. Now, before you went over because of the tsunami disaster there, what had you been doing again? Review that briefly.
My husband was an IT director at SAS Institute, which is a software company in North Carolina, and I was actually a part-time assistant teacher at one of my children's schools. Okay,
so that's, I think a lot of people can relate to that kind of a scenario. And at that time, you didn't think that you'd ever be doing something like this?
Oh, no. Oh, my word.
What would you say?
Not at all.
What would you say to those? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. The funny thing is, now I cannot imagine my life without this being a part of it. But before, I was very happy and content. I thought, I love my life.
Hilary, in the about a minute and a half we have left, why don't you tell us what you would give as suggestions to some people who might feel like they're getting out of their comfort box to do what you did, actually, and go to a foreign country. If they're feeling God tugging them, what advice or suggestion would you have for them?
I would say put your yes on the table. Yes, Lord, I'll go wherever you tell me to go, and I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Read the Word very intentionally. And just remember and claim every one of His promises. He's gone before you. He promises to be with you, and His grace really and truly is sufficient. So believe that and trust in that. When you believe God is who He says He is and trust that God is who He says He is, obedience is easy. It's not necessarily an easy road to walk, but He's going to be with you. And when Jesus said, "Follow me," the biblical response is, "Yes, Lord."
I suppose that because of this experience, you're leaving your table pretty free and open for God moving you. That could be anywhere, I suppose, even if it's just staying where you are right now, right?
Absolutely. To be honest with you, it's hard to be back in the States. I long for and miss Southeast Asia every single day.
Wow. Hilary Alan, the author of a book called Sent, How One Ordinary Family Traded the American Dream for God's Greater Purpose. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.